as we're in God's movement and committed to the mission of God, we ask ourselves at some points along the way, what is it that's going to sustain us? And I talked earlier about prayer and rhythms of prayer. I think that's important for every community to kind of establish and lay down as rhythm. But it seems to me there are other practices that grow out of that. And in our community, those practices have been very important. And I just wanted to name two briefly. The first is a commitment to confession. The prayers of the church, the prayer that Jesus taught us, brings us back to confession. Forgive us our debts, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who've trespassed against us. Having a space in community life for confession, I think, is a way of expecting that we will fail sometimes, and yet knowing that with God we can fail well, we can fail forward in a way that helps us grow. Because in every time that we come to confession, confession brings us closer to God, and through the practice of forgiveness brings us closer to one another, so that we know that we're safe in a place where we really are loved. Confession, I think, is essential for a community that's going to make it over the long haul. And at the same time that confession kind of acknowledges that we're all messed up, and we're going to fall, and we're going to fall on each other, and when we hurt each other, we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. I think there's also the practice of celebration. And the practice of celebration is a commitment to saying, while we know that all of that stuff is true about us, we also know that we're created in the image of God. Everybody's created in the image of God, and everybody needs to be celebrated. And so our community is pretty committed to having birthday parties to celebrate people, people in our community and neighbors, and especially kids who often feel overlooked and pushed to the side. There's nothing like having a big birthday party and a big cake and lighting candles and singing and celebrating people, because celebration, I think, is at the heart of God's relationship with us. That's right there in the creation story, God's delight in us when God creates us. And if we don't remember that, I don't think we can sustain ourselves in being part of God's movement.
We got a saying down south where I grew up that you're the spitting image of somebody. So I heard growing up, you're the spitting image of your Uncle Dean, and it kind of, folks say it might be shorthand for you're the spirit and image, spitting image. But what it means is not just that you look like that person, but you remind people of them. You have the character of them. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what being a Christian is about. It is about becoming people that remind folks of Jesus, that the character and who Jesus is becomes a part of us, so that, as Paul wrote, the life I live, I no longer live, but Jesus lives in me. That's what we're going for, and we're all going to fall short of that. But I think it keeps pushing us is community. That just as important as it is to be a radical Christian and to live, this in this countercultural way or whatever, like, community is absolutely at the core of it, because part of the good news is that you're not alone. And Jesus lived in community. He sent the disciples out in pairs. We're made in the image of a God that is this plurality of oneness. So community is what we're made for. In fact, when the first humans made, God doesn't say it's real good until they're together, helping each other. So I think as we talk about things like moving closer to the pain and the suffering of our world and bearing each other's burdens, we have to have people that carry that with us. So when someone comes home and they say, Antoine's dad beat him up again, everybody carries the weight of that together. And we have everybody's imagination trying to work on how to keep that from happening again. So I think part of what energizes us is to have folks around us that carry those burdens together and that also celebrate together, and we can see Jesus in them. We can see God's love in them, and so they keep pushing us a little bit closer. They dare us to risk a little bit more, and that's what community, I think, is about, is having this critical mass that's moving each other closer to God. As Dorothy Day of the Catholic Worker Movement said, we're creating a society where it's easier to be good. And that's what we're trying to move each other towards. So it takes community to do radical discipleship.
Once you do the big thing for God, you make some growth, you make some permanent development, or you do something significant. When that is over, there's a big letdown in your life. That's when you now need refreshing and motivation. And I think then that's when we have to refocus. And when I get down and out, I go to the Psalms, and the Psalms refreshes me. I go to the Proverbs, they refreshes me in life. And I go to the other popular songs that we sang that reunites me into the challenge that original went into, and then I'll go on to the next one and go on to the next one. So it's a refreshing. The Word of God and the Spirit of God, in obedience to God's will of the Father, it is the Father's will. It is the Son who makes God real to us, bring him into a way that we can know him. He was the incarnated God. And it's his Spirit that carries out the work in us. Then we celebrate. We celebrate. We celebrate. And celebration reunites us to our purpose and to in life. So I think people need they need to know when the dump is coming. They need to see it coming. And definitely it's going to come after victory. And not only would that dump come, but Satan and all of his temptation comes after victory. And it comes out of that hour time, in that time when you are going through that celebration. At the end of that celebration, the devil's going to come. The devil's going to come. I guess you can see a little of that in the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. I think you have that. He was revealing himself as God, and he was being tested by the temptations of the world. Can he go in this and do it? And so it was after he went through that big victory that he had solved the big victory. He had fasted 40 days. You know, he had conquered that. And then Satan comes with all these temptations. And then that's when we're drawn away. And so we got to be aware of that. And of course, all of that, his answer, and even Satan's approach to him is through the Word of God. And so faithfulness to this promise, what God has said, let God be true, or every person be a liar. I think that we learn how to use the Word of God as I nurture. And of course I think, again, the Psalms make us reflect upon the victories that we have won. And so since we won that victory, we can win this next victory.